All rise for the flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A moment of silence to remember the service and sacrifices of the armed service members who protect our nation and the first responders who protect our neighborhood. Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Quinn.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Palumbo.
Here.
Councilmember Smith. Here. Councilmember Sackett.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Vice President Abrahamson. Here. President Deniak.
Here.
This meeting was advertised in the Daily Record, the official newspaper for the Township of Rockaway, on January 8, 2018. Notice was posted on the official bulletin board of Rockaway Township.
Next on the agenda, item number 6 is the designation of the Sergeant at Arms. Township Code 2-5.15 decorum. While the council is in session, members shall preserve order and decorum. The council president, at his or her discretion, shall direct the chief of police or such other person in the police department as he may designate to be the sergeant of arms at the council meeting. The sergeant at arms shall employ reasonable means to maintain the proper order and decorum consistent with accepted standards. I don't see the chief here today, but I see 2 officers. Will either one of you be serving as the sergeant at arms this evening?
I'll be.
Okay, can you identify yourself, officer, please?
Yeah, Sean George, Rockaway Township Police Department.
Officer George, thank you for serving as the sergeant at arms this evening. The accepted standard is that members of the audience are asked to keep their volume to an inaudible level so that business can be conducted and so that those who are speaking can be clearly heard. If an individual becomes audible, the sergeant at arms is expected to ask the individual to reduce their volume to an inaudible level or to ask the individual to leave the meeting room as necessary. Next on the agenda, item number 7 is the approval of minutes. On this meeting's agenda, we have 4 sets of minutes. February 2nd, regular meeting. February 27th, regular meeting. March 13th. I'm sorry. February 22nd, regular meeting. February 27th, regular meeting. March 13th, regular meeting and closed session. Would anyone like to move these minutes? Moved by Smith, second by Kelly. Is there any discussion with regards to the minutes? Everyone hasn't had an opportunity to review them. Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Quinn.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedlander.
Yes.
Councilmember Cusio.
Yes.
Councilmember Palumbo.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Sackett.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Vice President Abrahamson.
Yes.
President Deniak.
Yes. I count 9 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is item number 8, council appointments. There are no council appointments for this evening. However, there were 2 vacant volunteer positions that have been posted on the town's website last week. One is the one that's listed here in the agenda, which is the Morris County Community Development Revenue Sharing, CDRS, committee member for a 1-year term, as well as a zoning board alternate position, which became vacant after a full position became vacant and was appointed from the alternate. So both those positions are on the township's website if anyone is interested in serving on those. The advertisements contain the instructions on how to apply. And you'll also see these two positions posted in this Sunday's newspaper, the day of arrest. I'm going to go a little bit out of order with regards to the agenda. We received a memo, we actually received an email with a number of reports yesterday from the business administrator in response to a request made by Council Vice President Abrahamson at our last meeting during our discussion with regard to Peterson Field. So I have a few questions about this report for the administration. The first is that the council received this in email yesterday, which is May 7th. As I look at the report is dated May 2nd and appears to have been transmitted electronically. So what caused the delay in delivering this loss control report to the council?
There was no delay in delivering it to the council. I received it yesterday.
You received it from the JIP yesterday?
Correct.
Okay. I understand that as a result of this report, that the administration took action to close down 2 facilities at Peterson Field.
Once the report was received, it was reviewed, and then I directed the Director of Public Works and the Recreation Coordinator to secure the facilities based on the recommendations.
Has there been any public notice with regard to that?
There was a posting placed on the website earlier today. And Facebook. Thank you.
Mr. Brewer, Council Vice President couldn't hear your response.
There was a release placed on the website earlier today, as well as Facebook, and then I said, thank you, Pat. It should remind me that it was all.
Mr. Mayor, do you concur with the decision to close those 2 facilities?
Yes. I was supposed to do on that page, too.
So, Mr. Brewer, during the budget meetings that took place, this council specifically asked the administration, were there any public safety hazards at Peterson Field? And the response that you gave was that there were none. So what happened between then, and I believe at the last meeting that same question was asked, and at the last meeting the answer that this council received was that you needed to do some further investigation. And then following that meeting, we now have this report that indicates that there are apparently public safety hazards.
There was discussion at the council budget meetings. At the time, I answered with the information I had available. There was a question posed at the last council meeting. As I mentioned, I'd have to get somebody to come out and take a look at it. Somebody did. And it was identified as a hazard. Prior to that, I was unaware.
Mm-hmm. So one of the hazards that is listed here with regards to the basketball court is that there is a curb surrounding the perimeter of the basketball court, creating a trip and fall hazard. Now, anyone who's ever been to those basketball courts and has looked at its construction and design, those curbs didn't manifest overnight or by accident.
They've been there for years.
Right, the curbs are designed into the basketball court.
Yes.
And yet, the recommendation here is that one, that the curb should be eliminated, and until the curb is eliminated, that the court should be closed.
Yes.
Right. So, in addition to this 2018 report, we received a 2016 report for Peterson Field. There is nothing mentioned in the 2016 report with regard to either the basketball court or the tennis court. Council Vice President Abrahamson requested the 2017 report. We received a 2017 report this afternoon, which didn't contain any information about Peterson at all. So my first question is, one, how did that curb get missed in 2016? And why was there no follow-up report in 2017?
As I'm not the safety consultant for the Joint Insurance Fund, nor was the president, I don't have an answer to those questions.
Mr. Mayor?
I concur with the business administrator, but also you have to realize that once you call attention to basketball courts, they haven't had
I'm sorry, say that again?
once the attention was called by you and Mr. Johansson to have a risk analysis done, our insurance company came back and said it's liability segment. So they may not have caught it in 2016, but they caught it in 2018. Since there's attention to it, we have to address it. That's why we should have done.
So on page 2 of this report, it shows outstanding suggestions for improvement. I see at least 2 other Peterson Field improvements listed from 2016. Everybody see the same? Page 2. Page 2 has a table on it. I'm looking at the table. The table lists outstanding suggestions for improvement. Status is based upon information provided during the survey. So there's a 2014 open status. And by the way, if you want to know what those statuses are, there's a list of them that you have to turn the document to landscape. It's further down. 2014 is related to Lake Ames. 2017.
Council President, we're talking about Peterson and basketball courts and tennis courts.
So,
That's what you asked about.
Mr. Mayor, please don't interrupt me. You'll have an opportunity to speak.
I'm just correcting what we're on the agenda.
We are discussing in Peterson, but Mr. Kelly, can you please also not interrupt? One at a time. So we have a table here that lists other outstanding suggestions for improvement that are open as of 2018. First one is from 2014, that apparently is still open, which is at Lake Ames. We have a 2017 August one, which is Ozzy's Storage, which is still open. And then we have 4 other 2016 ones that are also still open. And as I look at the table at the back, 2 of those 2016 ones are at Peterson Field. So we still have 2 other open improvements that have not been addressed since 2016.
And what would they be? I don't have the point.
Council President, if I might, in the email that I transmitted this afternoon, anticipating the question on the subject, I did reference the fact that, although not reflected in the report, all but one item that was outstanding has been addressed.
And why is that not reflected in the report that we received, which is dated last week?
Because the communication wasn't sent with proof to the joint insurance fund to be closed out. So
And
that's
what is the outstanding item that's still?
the storage of equipment in Ozzy's, whatever it says, Ozzy's barn, Ozzy's building. That's the only item that's outstanding and it's being rectified as we speak.
So my next question then, Mr. Mayor, is with regards to the recommendations that are made here in this report. With regard to the tennis court, the recommendation is that the cracks be repaired or the surface be resurfaced.
Yes.
And with regard to the basketball court, the recommendation is that the drain covers be repaired and that the curb be eliminated. So then my question for you, Mr. Mayor, is when will those remediation repairs be made to those, and or when does the administration expect to provide a presentation to this council with regard to the status of Peterson, as this council has asked twice this year?
As far as what? Status as far as what?
The overall plan for Peterson Field and the needs there.
The overall plan for Peterson, okay, so under our form of government, I'm the executive branch, okay? I submit a budget. Once I submit the budget to you on February 22nd, right? That is the money that's allocated that we need, myself and every department head in here, to run this municipal government. It's a corporation, okay? The council, once they get that budget, on February 22nd, should go in and go line by line item, they said that you did, 13 hours, and ask questions. Now, I believe that you asked the questions in the department heads, but you didn't make the cuts until the 13th hour on the last day. So, from February 22nd to whatever day it was that you made the $100,000 cut to the budget, removing the basketball court, is that kind of question to be asked, okay? So if you look at prior budgets, and you've been on the floor, and you know, you have seen that every year we allocate capital funding for rec improvements. We did the concession stand last year, we did the parking lot the year before, we put money in for the fencing and the backstops. So that is the plan. The plan is to allocate money every year to a recreation facility that needs it. That's the master plan. There's nothing in there. We can't allocate a plan or go out to bid until the money's there. So this year we had $80,000. We originally had $80,000 into the tennis courts, with $80,000 next year, and $100,000 for basketball courts. We decided to take the $80,000 out of basketball courts and the tennis courts and put them next year to make $180,000 to get the sports we done next year, and strictly focus on the basketball court system, knowing that, you know, it was a 0% increase budget, a drop to $300,000, and you guys are looking to, you know, really tighten it up. So I didn't want to go overburden over the $2 million cap on capital, $2 million. So that's why we moved it over. It was there. Now, when you have a capital expenditure that's $100,000, all you need to do is vote on is a 5% payment. So you actually could have just voted for $100,000. They would have only allocated $5,000 for that project. And then you have the ability to stop the project in its tracks during this process. So, you know, that's how it's been working. So, I mean, you asked a question about fixing this. Let's fix it the right way. It's not going to be any of that. We allocate. Let's all get together for a change. Show the community you did this, right? Do an adjustment to the budget just for this project. You can leave every other budget out there, but just let's get this project done. You know?
Mr. Mayor, so Mr. Mayor, you've spoken for quite a while. I'll remind you that, Mr. Mayor, you didn't attend a single one of the budget sessions that we had. And Mr. Puzio, you haven't been recognized. Mr. Puzio.
I'm your equal up here. You run the meetings, I'm the councilman as well.
You will have an opportunity to speak.
I don't care if you keep begging. Let's fix the courts.
Mr. Puzio, you haven't been recognized to speak. You haven't been recognized to speak. If you want to be recognized to speak, you can follow the rules like everyone else.
You don't follow them.
We will be taking a recess until 7:55.
Jeremy, grow up.
I'm tired of hearing the gavel. I'm tired of your game, Jeremy.
Review Robert's
Everyone
rules.
here
You
is
are not
tired of your
permitted to
game.
gavel over somebody when they're speaking.
Keep gaveling.
Deposition.
Have the police remove me. Keep gaveling.
Close to the year. Deal with it and fix it.
50 the other night.
What a joke.
What
a joke you are. This whole council lacks leadership, and that's the problem. You're the problem. You follow your own rules. I'm taking a break now myself.
You've been provided with Robert's rules on gaveling in open public session.
You give a crap about the
And I'll be behind my thumbs.
I don't care.
That's all right, you have an agenda. You know what your agenda is, you've seen it. That's how it is.
Americans
So
for
just stop,
prosperity, look it up.
bring this team together, and don't waste our time in this town. You just spent 20 minutes blaming somebody, fix it. This is ridiculous. This actually matters. You know, we're townspeople too. And thanks for the 68 cents and saving it, because it's destroying this town. That's right.
We have recess until 7:55.
Right. Well, you called the recess because you couldn't control it anymore.
Oh, why?
Oh, it's not a gnat, Patty. Disgusting. It's not a gnat, trust me. The act of tears is what's going on. We're not getting those courts fixed. We're not allocating the money. They're in horrible shape. Horrible shape. Horrible shape.
No, in that regard, but in that regard, it's like, there's no, like consultant or something. Makes it easier.
Enjoy Florida.
Yeah, it's an act, all right. My kids play out there.
Tell me the last time you were at Peterson anyway.
The last 3 years.
What?
You had a council meeting for the last 3 years.
What does it matter? I'm here now and I'm not leaving.
Right.
Why is a council member addressing someone?
We're in recess, sir.
It matters nothing, because you say you're in recess. You never answer questions anyway.
We're in recess, there's a quorum rule. We can say what we want.
And what does it matter what happened in the last 3 years since we're in recess? You're here now. You're the one that makes the decision, right? You voted on the budget? You voted $100,000 away. Funny, you have nothing to say now.
It's like an interrogation. Let's just fix it. Let's just move on and fix the basketball court. Let's stop interrogating. Let's just move forward. Either the money's going to be allocated or it's not. And that's what needs to be this report now. Or we don't need to dissect everything. It needs to be either we're going to move forward, fix it the right way or not. Let's just move forward. Everything's fresh right here.
Actually, it's going to be big.
We're back in session, 7:55 p.m. Mr. Mayor, I have a copy of the capital budget sheet from the printed workbooks that the entire council received. Mr. Mayor, you haven't been recognized. You haven't been recognized, Mr. Mayor. I haven't asked you a question yet. I'm speaking right now. I'm speaking right now, Mr. Mayor. I didn't ask you a pointed out that you didn't attend the meeting. That wasn't a question. You didn't attend a single one. So, Mr. Mayor, twice previously, this council has informed you, which you're already aware, that there are 5 new council members here. This council has twice before requested that you provide a presentation on what the master plan is for Peterson. You have yet to schedule that with us, although we've offered that. You just told us that your master plan for Peterson is to simply put money in the budget for various projects each year. Well, that's not a sufficient master plan, Mr. Mayor. A master plan includes presentations to the council on the details of those projects well in advance of asking for the money in the budget process to pay for those things. This council will not be simply paying for things without knowing where that money is going, because that is not a fiscally responsible thing to do. So for a third time, Mr. Mayor, I am asking you to please schedule a time for this council to receive a presentation at a regular meeting that can be open to the public so that everyone can see what the administration's overall plan is for Peterson, well in advance of the next budget process.
What overall plan?
So you have no overall plan. That's what you're telling
The plan
us.
is to upgrade every facility that needs to be done for that given year. We've
Okay.
hold on. We've heard residents come up here over the years saying that our facilities used to be top notch, top of the line, right? For 20 years now. Now that they're going under, we have to put money back into the infrastructure. So I gave you a budget that included this year alone upgrading the basketball courts. Next year is the tennis courts. When you get your capital budget, you see expenditures into the future. That's the master plan. Everybody that's been on that has experience knows that you do projections in the capital, and that's what's going to be done in the next couple of years. Like the fire department puts in, you know, an engine this year, an ambulance next year, a pumper the year after that. And that's, there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no master plan. The master plan basically is upgrading facilities. Now, if you want me to get a planner in and design the field and do an up thing, adding another field up top, putting a rec center in, redoing the basketball courts, putting a dog park in, all that. We can do that, but it's going to cost money to get a planner in, which is going to have to be allocated. Or we can just maintain what we have and upgrade when it's needed. The basketball courts are 30 years old and there's need of an upgrade. We did that first because there's 30 to 50 kids there in every summertime. And the tennis courts we pushed off until next year because there's not a lot of residents use that. Right? So that's what we did. We maintained.
Okay.
That's why I give you the money, give you the budget, and tell you it's the money we need to do it. And it's your ability to ask the questions of why do you need it. So this is why we need it, because we want to upgrade.
So, Mr. Mayor, you just told us there is no master plan. Every number on this sheet corresponds to some project or some component of a project. There should be a presentation to this council before we see this in the budget as what those projects are. If you want it funded, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. You have 5 new council members who weren't here last year. I've been here for the last 5 years. I've yet to see a single presentation on Peterson Field in this governing, for this board. So there's absolutely no basis from which, there's absolutely, Mr. Mayor, I let you speak and I didn't interrupt you. Okay? Mr. Mayor.
But he's right, he's right.
So I've asked twice now, I'm asking a third time. Mr. Kelly has a comment and Ms. Abrahamson had something she wanted to say. And if there's other discussion as well, we will open it beyond that. Mr. Palumbo after that. Mr. Kelly has the floor.
Before I take the floor, Council President, you want to finish your own sentence. Comment also on that.
Thank you.
Just give a moment.
So, you're saying that you never seen with the upper parking lot, we had it on the west page, we had it sitting out here in the display case for months that you don't recall seeing the upper parking lot.
Mr. Mayor, I was very clear with you. I've been here for 5 years. Your administration, because you've been there for those 5 years, has never done a presentation to this governing body on what your overall long-term plans are for Peterson. Okay? It is not sufficient to me, or majority of this council, to simply have numbers on a sheet and give you a blank check. That is not going to happen with this council. Mr. Kelly, you had some comments. Unless you'd like to lose your time, I suggest you make your comments.
And if I may, and the members of the audience as well, just no interruption. If I can have some dialogue to go back and forth and just get my point across, maybe we can rectify what the point of solution. Perhaps we can come to a solution on this. I don't think going back and forth and having some discourse in this venue right now is really doing anything productive. Quite frankly, I think it's counterproductive. So if you would just give me the opportunity, and we can have comments, we may not come up with a solution tonight, but it would be the efforts of moving forward in a positive direction, because this is really just, it's hurting the children. Forget about everything else. There is some politics, unfortunately, that are playing into this, and we can just put that aside. Being a resident in Rockaway Township for 48 years, I participated in all those fields and saw the production of Peterson Field. And the mayor and myself live in an area that was a common cut through. We saw the ball coming up, Peterson Field that was going on there. I participated in basically every single sport that we had in the township. In that area, in that time when they had done that, if the mayor remembers, when we had assembled that basketball court, it was going to be a dual use, if you recall, Mr. Mayor. Correct. So the berms were created in that area to flood out the area in the attempt of having it an ice rink. Because at that time there was only one ice rink, which was meant you couldn't get any type of ice time. I was a hockey player throughout all that time, as well as a goalie, as well as Knowles. It wasn't something that came to fruition. It didn't work. The 4 catch basins that were there, they couldn't plug them up accordingly to have the water stay there the length of time in order to freeze, to have a fun-filled ice rink that we had there. So with that being said, that's why the curbs were there, and that's why the catch basins were there, in conjunction of having the basketball court as well. The area hasn't changed. The upper lot has, the new concession stand and stuff like that. But that in itself, there hasn't been any improvements that have been there. Now, what a lot of people I don't hear talk about here is that they're complaining about it, but nobody's saying any kind of a solution. What can we do? What's going on? What's happening? That's a problem. It's a problem. But when we look at what we have there, has been for so long, now there's an issue that came up. It was questioned because many of the people that are in this audience now were part of the budget process, and unfortunately neither was the mayor, for whatever reason it may have been. On our last day of the budget that we had, of our meetings where we made some cuts, there were some members that had left, for whatever reasons they had. Mr. Sackett enjoyed the Ranger game that you went to. Mr. Freeland had something else going on.
Not sure what that has to do with anything.
I know it doesn't, but you left.
One at a time.
So with that, we had these things presented there, that questions could have been raised and maybe answers could have been provided. But we did specifically ask for certain things because of the budget that came forward of some of those capital improvements. Sometimes when we see some of these capital improvements and what I look at, maybe I'm wrong looking at it because I'm a very fiscal person, not only in what we're doing here as a council person because I'm spending your money, but on my own business and my own household I do the same thing. So I'm trying to take the politics out of it. I'm trying to apply it in a business sense. And I hope that everybody else here seems the same way. But in doing so, some of the projects that we see that have come forward, there is a potentiality of having our own members, our employees in our public works department and recreation to do some of these things. And I notice, Mrs. Quinn, you're nodding, but just hear me out. So with that being said, some of these men and women have an extreme talent to do these things. We can pave roads, we can mill roads, we can install sewer drains, we can do everything else, but in this case, we can't resurface the baseball. As you shake your head, no. We can do all these other great things that are far more evasive of work, which what I do, so know it somewhat a little bit better than the average person. I think that we can do that. And that was one of the components that we mentioned at the budget meeting with the potentiality of having that happen. We did speak to some other DPW workers that are in that field of asphalt and do paving. We talked to some members in the community as well that do the same thing. And there are some opportunities to save money. It's $100,000 to do that. Now I can't speak for anybody, Mr. Cruzio, Mr. Freeland, and the rest of the members on this dais with me. I went down there. I measured out the actual playing area, 70 by 165, it's a little over 11,000 square feet. We did buy an asphalt zipper to mill, which has a 4 feet spread. It would take 20 passes to do that if we milled it to resurface it. depending on the avenue of what we take, we can do one of a couple of things. We can either raise the catch basins, mill out the 4 feet around them from the 18-inch catch basin square, repair it, and be done with it. We can fill dirt, because in the report, we don't know if the tripping hazard is going into the ball area or if it's coming out of the ball area. However, it's been there for 30 years. These things haven't been identified on that. Those things, like some people are nodding their head in a different direction, can be addressed from our rec and DPW workers. I have so much confidence in them to do that, as well as they themselves. Or we can resurface it in its own self. We can come in, and if we do a 3-inch base and have it down to a 2.5 compact, it's 220 ton at $60 a ton. My cost, I'm sure you can get it better on a pull-out program. We're looking at $13,000. If we do it only on a 2-inch with an 1.5 inch of compaction, we're only talking 145 ton, $9,000. If we had somebody else come in to do the labor with an actual power box and spreading it and rolling it, it's about $10,000 in labor. That's packing it and doing everything that's there. So there are avenues that are there. Now, it's not stairs that go down because of the terrain that's there, but there's a way to make a path to go down. They did it up at Telemark, they made a path, made it ADA compliant, which it's not right now, which Mr. Sackett, you would be really considerate on that. So there are avenues to make this real simple. But if you start looking at the numbers that are there, justifying it as $100,000 that we originally were looking to get, shaking your head, versus what it would cost if we provided the material and a little bit of the effort, we just participated in a shared surface for an asphalt zipper. If we did it that way, why not use these things that we purchase? Why not use the talents for the men that we pay for? And have them have more of all its pride in doing a project that the kids will benefit from decades on. But when we were there, maybe some of you in the audience would know, if I had my daughter ask me for $20 and I asked her what it was for, and she said, none of your business, she's not getting the $20. Now, in this case, if we're asking our administration, the $100,000, but what does it entail? Well, the basketball courts. Well, what does it entail in the basketball courts? Are we milling it? Are we removing it entirely? Are we putting new sub-base on? Are we going to do a dual purpose for hockey and for basketball? Are we doing a stairwell? Are we doing a path to go down there for ADA compliancy? None of that's mentioned. So what do? We're not getting any information, and we have to put it on hold for the next year budget that's going there. There was a projection time, and Mr. Mayor, you can correct me, of when this project was going to potentially start.
You need the funding first.
But you had no idea. Did you have a projection of when you thought it would actually happen?
As soon as the budget was passed.
So you already had a plan that was going to start and get this thing going?
We have a plan that once you approve the money, we're going to come before you with the bid specs, so you have to approve the bid specs and move forward.
How long do you think that was going to take? It could take a year, 2 years, it could take a while.
A week, 2 weeks, depending on...
Or it could take longer than that. Because we've had projects that have gone on that take a long time. The rec center is not built. How long has that been a project? I know, but it's an example.
That's a good point. How much money have you spent?
Let's please stay on point here. Discussion here is with regard to
It's not
basketball
done.
and tennis.
And I appreciate it, Council President, but again, if I could have the floor still. So those are things that we're putting in place. Now, again, I don't know how many people have gone down there, and now it's all shut down and all the rings are removed off the backs of the courts. 2 of the courts, which are in the outer area, don't even have a catch basin in them. So those courts themselves could still be utilized without having any kind of an issue of concern. So there was no reason to take off the 2 ending courts rather than 2 middle courts, which have the catch basin caught in the center line of that. Those catch basins are outside the foul line toward the end of the purview of it. So there are some temporary things that we could have put in place that wouldn't have disrupted the basketball court there, but we didn't do that. And then when we look at some of the risk of the other areas that are on there, I don't even see, we have the announcer booth there, Mr. Mayor. Have you seen that?
Mr. Kelly, again, just a reminder, we're discussing the tennis courts and basketball.
I do understand that, but Council President, if I may, there's a lot of things where you have to walk past a worse concern to get to this issue that's here, which again, in my personal opinion, I think there's a little bit more politics that are playing with this rather than the actual issue at hand. I went there last night to measure it out, and the place was filled. People parked all the way down Fleetwood Drive, and it's busy. But there's never been a concern raised by anybody there at these council meetings of all the stuff that's going on, of these situations that are here. even in 2017, of our supervisor in our rec program just mentioned some cracks that were there, which they did the same thing up at Lake Tullamore, the park that we purchased, where they sealed those cracks and then they sealed the entire court. We haven't maintained that area for so long to get it in disarray that it is right now. And that's another part of the problem we have. So because of the issue there was no answers that were raised on there. Being somewhat fiscally conservative about the spending of it, and maybe looking into going in and have our own town guys do that, none of that was ever addressed.
It didn't have to be addressed, right? Well, you know what I'm saying? If you allocated the money, the debt, it's in the bank, and then when you move the bids back forward, then, like we do in the ball field, we got the money, and we utilized our people to grade it, and we saved the town money. I think we allocated, say, 360, 380, I'm not sure.
Money's not important.
But money's not important. But when we made our own people, we saved $100,000. It's the same thing. If we did $100 grand on basketball courts and utilized our people to save the ton of money, and basketball courts came out $40,000, $30,000, we're not going out and spending that 60 grand so it's there. It goes back.
But why wouldn't you address that then? Because even when we had the budget before it was originally introduced, we could still alter that process. But no, you can alter it any time. But if you have a projection of what you want to do leading forward, again, I disagree with I respectfully disagree with your ideology or your methodology of what you want to do as far as spending, especially taxpayers' money.
But it's not spending.
Well, you're taking it aside and putting it there.
No, you're only putting aside $5,000.
I understand that, with the attempt of spending $100,000. I understand that. So when the individuals in the public say that we blew $100,000, we didn't give it, that's not true then.
Exactly, it's not.
Well, then correct the people in the audience with that.
Well, I should correct the council president, because he's the one that said that he saved $250,000.
Well, we took out $240,000 in the budget.
Of debt. Of debt. Mr. Kelly, I just want to point out, because I think you were going to say this, but the sheet that I held up with regard to the capital budget, the numbers that Mr. Kelly has described, because this discussion took place with the administration during the budget meeting, specifically about having the public employees who have the skills that Mr. Kelly has talked about to do this work and the equipment to do this work. The numbers that Mr. Kelly has quoted, the highest number I think I heard was $13,000, maybe $15,000
For material only.
Right, plus the labor of perhaps the employees.
$10,000 for the labor.
So we're at $25,000 at the number that Mr. Kelly has described. Let's just say Mr. Kelly's numbers are a little bit off. Let's call it $50,000. All right. On this sheet that everyone got a copy of, it says at the bottom, new projects funded through existing public safety ordinances, basketball resurfacing, $50,000. So there's already $50,000 that you've already borrowed and allocated previously available. And that is higher than Mr. Kelly's highest number. You have the money to do the work without the extra $100,000, for which there is no description as to how that money would be spent. No explanation as to what we're getting for that tax dollar. If you want to fix the basketball courts, Mr. Mayor, you have the money in the ordinance.
Well, I plan on fixing basketball courts, with or without.
Then you have the money to do it.
If I may, please, I'm sorry. And that's the mentality, Mr. Mayor, that we're not trying to create here. I'm going to do it whether you like it or not, kind of the mentality. That's just not how it works.
No, he's trying to say that, I'm asking.
I'm not an apologist, I'm not getting into any extra head as well as yours. I'm only listening to what you're saying and responding to your words. But again.
You really think it's just repaving that?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm only reading the report.
New fences, new poles, it's taking 6 courts, making 2 full courts, so someone needs to play there.
You already have a plan, but why wouldn't you?
This has been here for the last couple of days.
Why wouldn't you present it to this governing body then? So you didn't, that's why you didn't get the money, Mr. Mayor, because you didn't have a plan. That's exactly the reason. And the fact is to make this court safe and do the repairs as described, you already have the money in existing capital ordinances.
Oh, you win.
All right. Ms. Abrahamson had some comments.
I just want to say that I kept hearing over and over that there was no actual master plan. I'm going to say that I brought up the master plan more than once because it was discussed between Mr. Cruzio and Mr. Mayor here. And I don't know the exact date of the council meeting, but Mr. Cruzio made a statement saying we have a big master plan for
The
Peterson.
master plan is
So-
the concept of upgrading the field, Mr. Ramsey. That's what it is. I mean, we go to this field, I go to this field many, many times a year. I knew the basketball courts out here thing. That's why the CRC, or that committee, that's what we put it in there for. They look, they determine what needs to be done. They submit it to recreation. Recreation comes up with a plan with them, and they say, listen, this is what we need in our capital budget.
However, I'm going to continue to say what I want to say. Once you hear, and we have 5 and 6 in council members, I don't even know, 5, a master plan, I think we're all anticipating the plan to be presented. I'm sorry, I do. I truly think that there was perhaps the communication of the master plan was an anticipation of that plan. Because a plan is a plan. Plans are tangible, they're reading, you can read a plan, it's created. So the master plan I've been waiting for, thinking that that's a great thing, and at the budget meeting, that is something I did comment on. We have needed a master plan for this recreational facility for many, many years.
So you just have a master plan?
So-
Mr. Mayor, you need to present us with the plan. Ms. Abraham.
I would like to see a master plan for Peterson. I would like to see an outline plan for Peterson Field and for us to move in the future. Keep up to pace with all the other towns.
Mr. Puzio, you'll have an opportunity later to, you'll have an opportunity to speak. Mr. Palumbo.
I'm done, that's it. That's all I have to say, is we did think we had a master plan to be presented to us. It was stated, we asked for it, and it was never.
And we did, we gave it in the budget, that was this year's master plan.
That's not a plan, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Palumbo, you have the floor.
Understood.
Had it gone forward,
Why?
had it gone forward,
Yes.
okay? New fences, resurfaced.
So it had to go to you first.
I understand that. Had it gone, I prefaced it by saying, had it gone forward. New fences, new backboards, resurfaced. Would that berm have been still there?
No,
It would have been removed?
I don't think so. It
No.
wouldn't be in the bid spec. As Councilman Kelly said, that thing was put there 30 years ago.
Understood.
To accommodate hockey, so, in the wintertime, and it never came to fruition.
Understood, but that berm would have been gone.
I would assume so. It
Okay.
was on the bid spec, yeah.
So, and that's the problem with the assumption, Mr. Mayor. Without a documented plan in writing that the council can actually review and having it presented, Mr. Mayor, I will reiterate it until you start to do it so that we can get some of these things moved along. Mr. Puzio, you had some comments. Would you like to speak?
Yes,
Please.
thank you. My comments are, I'm going to speak for myself. When I go down Peterson Field, I take a look. I'm not an engineer. I don't have the technical expertise that Mr. Kelly has in mechanical. And I rely on our town certified engineers, people who do this for a living, and people who have to do this, who have certifications, who have the background, the degrees, to the insurance coverage, all of that. They're the ones who need to do this project, not myself, not any of the council people. Although I appreciate Mr. Kelly's expertise, and he certainly has a lot, ultimately this is going to have to be done, it's going to have to be laid out by engineers and whatnot. I mean, Mr. Perone, tell me if I'm incorrect, if I'm just following what I've learned over the years. The master plan that I spoke of, that I brought up, that I use those words because on my own, I go down and I live close to Peterson Field. Sometimes I take a walk down there and I see the kids play. My son, I go down there, I play basketball with them once in a while. I can physically see what the basketball courts look like, what the bocce ball courts look like that are overgrown, what the tennis courts look like. You don't have to be a genius to go down there and look and see that they're in disarray, or that they're peeling up, or that there's a drain in the middle, that they're not in good shape, we'll say. The master plan that I spoke of is, when I had questions, I call our engineers, I call Mr. Brewer, I call Mr. Pop, I call Mr. Lutz, and I'll come to town hall sometime. They'll say, hey, listen, what are you guys looking to do? I'll speak with the mayor, who happens to be present. And I'll say, what are you guys looking to do with the field? Are you looking to do this? Oh, this is a concept that we have. This is an idea that we have. And it follows suit. You know, the proof is in the actions. The parking lots were put in, one component. The concession stand was improved, another component. The basketball courts were due to be, they're in the budget, they were due to be fixed this year. I can see that they're needed. I don't really need a department head to tell me that they're not in good shape, you know, that we're not competitive with the surrounding towns, that we're not repairing our infrastructure. You don't have to be an expert in that area just to see that paint is peeling off walls and things don't look so good. So that's kind of where that master plan came up from. It came up from my own attempts to speak to the town engineers. I was on the planning board for 3 years. Some of this came up in planning board meetings, were discussed. A lot of things happen impromptu. If the engineer's there, you know, side meetings take place, not meetings, but side discussions take place. So I garnered most of my institutional knowledge by just being on different boards and being in the town and taking a walk down there. So if we're going to talk about a master plan, maybe I used the incorrect words. I should say maybe there's a plan in place, and I could see that plan by being on this council for 2.5 years. I could see it moving forward with the parking lot, with the concession stand, the basketball courts. I saw us making things better. And to me, that's a good thing. Now, I understand about spending money. I absolutely understand that. But the basketball court line item was stripped to zero. We can't even buy supplies. It was not reduced. If it would have been reduced 40, 50, what would you say, about 50,000?
Mr. Kuzio, you have the floor. 50 in it.
I'm just asking Mr. Kelly a question. 50, you said, like, kind of, it might be a good number.
I'll give you the total number when we get down to
Okay.
that, but we have 50,
somewhere around
we have 50 currently in there.
Okay, but that line item was reduced to zero. We can't even buy supplies. So now we're missing numbers and different things are coming out of here, things that I didn't hear before. Maybe we need a little clarification from Mr. Brewer, some of the, from Lisa, as far as where money's going to be drawn from. The only thing I want is, very frustrating is, I drive by those basketball courts, I live there. They are packed every day with kids, with adults. That is one of the most widely used areas. I go down there once in a while with my kids. It's closed now. It's closed, whether it took 5 years, 10 years, whether the mayor or the council or the past council or present council should have fixed it or should have monitored it closely. I don't care. This is not going to turn out like the War of the Roses where he said, she said, because after a while, people don't care whether you're right or whether you're wrong. They want things fixed. And that's what I want done. It's very frustrating to see that. Very, very frustrating. Certainly not an act when I get upset. Certainly not an act. It's an act of frustration on my part. So, and I apologize if I got a little spirited, if you could call it that. I apologize if I said some things that were out of order, out of Robert's Rules order. But I want those basketball courts fixed. And I think that we need to do something to fix them.
If I may,
Mr. Kelly, you have an opportunity. Does anyone else have any comments before I allow Mr. Kelly to speak again? Hearing none. Mr. Kelly.
and if I can echo on to Mr. Kuzio, from some of the stuff that was there, we do have money that's there. We don't have it down to zero, though we did not approve the 100,000 we didn't have. I've heard under my breath from my colleague to the right of me. I've heard Mr. Kuzio. I have not heard once of the solution to this currently right now. So,
Mr. Kelly has the floor.
and I appreciate everything you say, Mrs. Baird. However, we have an opportunity here to make this, if anything, to fix it permanently so it's still usable, Mr. Mayor. And I would throw out options that are there and see what you want to do and moving forward as well as the council. But as I said, there's a lot of ways we can do this. Excuse me, Mr. Brewer, and I'll get to you. Are you going to question something I'm saying, or you wanted to interject?
No, I just wanted to clarify an item that was discussed earlier about available resources, but whenever I'm recognized, I'll be happy to share.
The basins themselves, if we did a 4-foot cutout around the whole entire basin area, and then we were able to take over that traffic, I'm all for it. We're going to eliminate that concern of the step out to the report. Very simple. You can probably do that in a day, right? It's easy. And as well as the berm, again, it doesn't indicate going in or going out, because the berm leaving the basketball court itself is no different than a curve going into the baseball park.
You cut off the berm completely. You gotta cut it out completely.
Or
transition.
Or when you're coming down into the slope or to the side areas, people generally park on the side and come into the basketball court area.
Typically coming across the street.
I mean, I watched it last night. I mean, maybe it was just that one time it was different than what you witnessed. But if we have the difference of height of the berm going in and going out, obviously going out, it's almost a 6-inch berm that goes up to the grass. But coming from the grass, there's a 2-inch one going into the basketball court. If the concern is going into it, there's no reason why we can't easily just put fill.
Well, I think it's coming out. It's very
Well,
flat.
but if it's coming out, it's no different than the height of a curve going into, like,
It's not on the basketball. I think, I'm not, you know what?
it doesn't mention it in there, but my offer is, or what I'm trying to offer, is if it is those things, which haven't been a concern until now, and even in the 2016 report, because this hasn't changed since 2016, but yet our previous administrator said it was perfect, it was fine. So since nothing's happened since 2016 and now, it's something different.
Mr. Kelly, you're correct. It wasn't there in 2016, and it was fine.
But nothing's changed though.
No, exactly. No, the only thing that's changed is now we asked our insurance company to come and evaluate the process. They came and told us it's a liability.
But we did the same thing in 2016.
You're missing the point, Mr. Kelly, and I understand we have a liability now.
Sure.
We have to know that's it. And something happens, don't liability.
But technically, we had a liability in 2016.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to make sure, so it's not really that this was created now, the liability's been there for quite some time.
The liability.
We looked at had an issue.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
You can walk out this building right now and trip on that little green strip on the door, and that's a liability. We'll get sued for that.
But the point I'm trying to get to is solution. A solution now that wouldn't take very long of a remedy.
We have to cut some things.
Now,
We'll look into it.
it's pretty good that's not looking into it. We can easily get it, I can have it donated and have it done. If it's a concern with any of our DPW guys, somebody,
We have to.
Mr. Krause, please.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Stop.
Mr. Kelly has the floor. I would ask Sergeant at Arms, if there's another outburst from Mr. Kress, would you please remind him of the accepted standards that I read earlier?
But,
Mr. Kelly.
and I'm going to ask this, and I hope you allow it and not interrupt with this. Mr. Brewer. Yes. This isn't your first rodeo as an administrator or an assistant administrator, and you've probably dealt with repairs and everything else, and risks and insurance and whatnot. What would you feel of a recommendation to move forward to get the courts from being closed by you today to being opened by a remedy? I have many of them in my own mind. What would be a remedy that you would think that would fix this?
There was previously a design change done, which is what the request was based on for the capital budget. So whoever, whether that was done in-house with Jim Lutz, whatever professional was involved in that, I would grab the professional who was involved in it. I would share the report with them, potentially ask the author of the report to participate, conduct a site meeting, develop a plan, figure out what's necessary, implement it, and get it done.
To fix the, to repair it currently so that it can be utilized. Like, we're not going to pave a whole road because we have a pothole. We're going to fix that pothole and then carry on.
Right. But
And
then
that's-
maybe to determine whether there's engineering involved or not involved, put everybody in a room, sit down, talk about it, put a plan together, and execute.
When our DPW repair a catch basin, does it go to the engineer?
No.
Okay. I have no more questions. I'm just saying.
Are
Thank
there
you.
any further comments by the council members with regards to this issue? I see Mr. Brewer and Mr. Perone following. Mr. Perone, you were following Mr. Brewer. Mr. Perone, you were following Mr. Brewer. Mr. Brewer has the floor.
I just want to clarify the identified $50,000 that's a component of the capital plan that was discussed with the council is not available funds for the purpose of use of the basketball court at this time. when it was discussed, that's something that needs to be repurposed, which is the same process required for the ordinance. So although there's safety considerations for the Peterson Field corridor, that's not an allowable use for replacing or repairing or upgrading the basketball court. It would still require legislative action in 2 meetings. So there would be an ordinance required. I just want to make sure people know that's not available money today.
Right, but the funds have been authorized previously as part of a previous project, no longer needed for that project. This governing body would have to repurpose it through the ordinance process to make it available for this project.
Correct. I just want to make sure everybody knew that. I didn't want anybody to walk away from the conversation thinking we could go because we can't necessarily go right.
And the total amount is $50,000.
As I
for the
noted on the
budget.
sheet, correct.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Pernick.
I just wanted to say that relative to whatever is going to be done, and I appreciate what Mr. Kelly said, because he probably has as much of a background in this as any engineer. If in fact an engineer's design is followed properly, then in fact there's an immunity under Title 59. It's called the design immunity. And so whatever is done, I would only suggest that it be the product of the design. That's where a professional signs off on it. And I think that it'll avoid any liability, even in just the repair aspect of it. If you guys want to go forward later and redo everything, obviously that will be part of the design. Probably they'll probably come up with a design engineer to work in town at that time.
Okay. If I may interrupt, Mr. Kelly.
Do you believe that there's going to be a plan just for repair?
I believe that based on the fact that you now have actual notice of a defect, the repair of the defect should be by design. That's it.
And that's something you can cite? What you said before of an improvement, but we're talking about a repair.
I'm saying whatever you do to fix the courts, I would try to get someone to put a design together.
Is that something, Mr. Mayor, Mr.
It only has to do with liability.
That, I understand. My follow-up question is that something that our township engineer is able to do?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Kelly?
I give the floor back to you.
All right. So we will be moving on from this item. Next item on the agenda, number 9, open to the public, limited to agenda items only. Township Code. At the conclusion of 5 minutes, an alarm will sound indicating that the speaker's time has expired, and the individual speaking is expected to immediately relinquish the microphone so that the next individual may speak. Failure to adhere to these rules will result in the council president using the gavel to reinforce adherence to the rules, and when an individual's speaking time has expired. If at any time a speaker ignores the gavel or refuses to relinquish the microphone, the sergeant at arms is directed to assist the individual in relinquishing the microphone and remove the individual from the meeting as necessary. First on the list is Jackie Bader. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jacqueline Bader, 129 Richard Mine Road. I just wanted to let you guys know that the one topic that is on the up for ordinance adoption today, the 0-1806, was reviewed and is being backed by the CRC. I know that there was some questions on that. I just wanted to clarify it, as well as I don't know if what was just previously talked about, if I'm allowed to talk about now to clarify from the CRC point, if that, because I can clarify some of the questions that were asked. Is that available or not available? For the basketball courts. Being on the recreation committee, I can clarify some of the questions.
Questions with regards to what?
The basketball courts.
Whose questions?
What you guys were asking about a plan.
Okay.
Can I quickly
Go ahead.
Okay, so there was a plan. We had a basic plan to reduce risk, make the basketball courts not just, because right now the basketball courts are not regulation, width or length. So the plan included making them width and length regulation, putting in a retaining wall, putting in new hoops, putting in lights so that people can play basketball at night, putting in an actual fence so that the ball does not go down Fleetwood Drive. All of this was put in to a plan for the basketball courts. I've seen it, we've actually looked at it. We had an engineer come up with it. I am an engineer, I reviewed it. I understand you guys want to put a Band-Aid on it, but it makes liability issues. All of the things by trip hazards and whatnot, just putting a Band-Aid on it is not going to work. That's why we had the master plan of the basketball courts. We have notional plans, as discussed, for an entire layout of Peterson Field. It's notional. We have to piecemeal it because there's not enough money to do it all. There never will be that much money to do it all. That's why we do piece by piece on what's being available now, what bonds are available to be taken by the town for these improvements. We do a lot as the Recreation Committee. It's not just little things. So I know nobody came to our Recreation Committee that, we have 2 liaisons. That was great. But no one asked us for another plan from the council for the budget. So that was part of our plan. We actually had an engineer put it all together, and that's why the liability was taken off of us by having the engineer review it. So just to let you all know, there actually is a foolproof plan to make this work. We have high school that gives these clinics for free on these basketball courts. We wanted to make sure they were regulation, because again, they're not right now. So by just putting a Band-Aid on it right now is not going to work. It might make things really quickly happy, but you're still going to have trip and fall hazards. You're still going to have issues of it not being compliant. You're still going to have no lights. The retaining wall is not there, so the dirt keeps going back in the courts. So that's why we had the master plan. So if you guys would like, I'm sure we can work together. If you ask the Recreation Committee or Recreation Supervisor for the plan that was made from the engineer, I'm sure they can present that to you. I don't know if there was a quote or not, because again, we can't really get a quote until we have money to pay someone to get a quote. Because nobody wants to bid on something that they're not going to be tangibly paid for later on. They don't want to bid on something and say, oh, well, in 3 years you might have money. Well, the bid's going to change. So that's why we try and focus in on getting an approximate number. So hopefully that clarifies something.
Thank you for your comments. No one else on the list. I'm closing the public portion to the public. Mr. Mayor, are you familiar with the plan, the written plan that Ms. Quinn Bader referred to? Either of the liaisons to the rec committee have they seen this written plan? Mr.
I've seen a plan that was drawn up with a lot of stuff on it. It wasn't with a master plan as far as different numbers by volunteer. I did see a plan that was drawn up by a volunteer.
Okay, Mr. Quinn.
Yes, that plan was a concept plan. It wasn't brought forward to fruition. It was a concept of what Peterson could look like in the 20th century, bringing it forward, okay? Again, the money allocation would have to be there to get the plan done correctly so that, as was stated, the person doing the plan would get paid. All right? Until that happens, the concept is beautiful, but it is not a true plan.
Council member Abrahamson and then Kelly.
I'm listening to the master plan that Ms. Bader had just presented.
Again, it's a concept.
Concept.
You did say master.
Yeah.
It's a concept.
One at a time, please.
Words.
Mr. Quinn, we allowed you to speak. Let Councilman Abrahamson speak.
We'll say the concept. I don't believe anybody on this day would hire a builder to build a home and get a deposit on that home without a review and approval of plans. It would have been very nice and forward-moving for the liaisons in the last year, when this obviously has taken the rec committee quite some time, okay, on a volunteer basis to put this together. So it would have been very good to hear and see the concept I understand you can't get the money to get the bids, but at least there would have been an idea from this council on the movement forward into the 20th century, as you just stated. It's well overdue. So I just am disappointed that the rec committee has been ignored with the work that they've done, and nothing has been brought forward to the council. Thank you.
Ma'am?
Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Quinn.
Mr. Quinn and Mr. Sack, how many recommend meetings that you have?
One per month.
What's that?
One per month.
One per month. How many do you attend? 2?
4.
You attended all of them?
Yes.
You were asked not to attend the one, but you didn't go.
Right.
You guys attended all of them?
Yes.
When was this concept presented? How old was the concept plan?
That concept plan.
You said 20th century, so I was just wondering how
Well,
old it actually is.
the concept plan was presented 2.5 meetings, 3 meetings, and it was just the concept at that time, and we were working through the ideas, and we had input from the basketball people about the undersized basketball courts. They requested those courts be made legit courts, and then there was input on putting lights, scoreboard, the whole 9 on there, new fencing, all right? That was all concept. Nothing came forward because they were waiting on the engineer that would have been hired to do this work. It was a concept, and it was, as a concept, it's going forward, it's developing, it's getting input from everybody. But until an engineer was hired, and this was a volunteer engineer, yes it was, and it was reviewed by my daughter who is an engineer, all right? It looks great, but until we have legit drawings and the person is hired and stamped, and yes, you don't buy a house without having legitimate drawings, but they get paid for legitimate drawings. Their license is on that, and their insurance is on that, okay? A concept is a concept. It doesn't carry insurance liability where a true engineer carries liability. And that's the whole deal with that, and should be thought about, just like when somebody gets sued, you bring in all the other people that are involved, your engineers, your architects, all right? Those are the people that carry insurance, just like we did at other facilities in this town. We brought in all the people that were sued so that this town doesn't get sued personally for anything our DPW or anybody else does that causes the liability to fall back on us, and we assume full liability. That's not the way to do business.
Mr. Kelly, Ms. Smith has a comment.
I have a comment. It would have been very, very nice if anybody even bothered to show us the concept before the budget was done. That's all I have to say. People, you have to have some communication. I'm tired of listening to all this. Why weren't we shown this concept? How many people here saw it? Mr. Quinn and Mr. Sackett, did you see it? Well, there's a problem. There's a problem. The concept is what you want to go forward with. I'm sorry.
Mr. Kelly has the floor again. Mr. Sackett, you'll have an opportunity, then Mr. Friedlander.
But again, I know we're really getting on a heavy tangent here.
Please stick to the topic.
But with regard to this concept plan and all these things that are going on in lights and making this thing legal to the specifications so that it's compliant and everything else, all these things going on, I've never heard of Pete. I mean, you're my colleague that sits next to me. I've never heard whatsoever about this. Not one. Mr. Sackett. Well, but in one sense, excuse me, in one sense there is. I just got done listening to a member of the public going into a, you heard the same thing. I just heard almost a presentation, or a mini presentation, or introduction to a presentation, and you're telling me there's nothing. So there's something that's different, but you're the liaison. You haven't spoken to us whatsoever. Okay, well then there's that concern with it. But in the other conversation, though, Mr. Quinn, where you talk about these engineers and all these, our DPW or our rep, they even sold the whole week playground. Nothing that was done, there's no conflict in it.
Actually, wasn't there an engineer that designed that program?
How long ago was that when they originally put it over there at Snake Hill? So you think because you moved from one location to that, it identifies an individual?
I don't know who moved it or what.
You've been a councilman since 2002.
Mr. Kelly, you're on different subjects, so stay with the subject.
But I'm saying, for all that
Stay
period,
with
for all that
subject.
period of time, you're talking about one thing. I don't mean to call you out on it, but I just want to be honest.
Mr. Kelly, do you have
Minutes, you're not getting.
Mr. Sackett and then Mr. Friedlander were next.
I just had nothing to add. I didn't think it was something that's ready to be brought up. If it would be ready to be brought up, I would have done it. Just
I'm asking for $100 grand.
Nothing, the whole major concept, believe it, if I had it, we'd have nice turf field and the whole thing ready to go. But we can't get $100 grand to fix some basketball courts. How would you have, you'll have money to spend, for a turf field? We're not ready for that. So I'm not gonna bring it up, because I don't have a good plan to present.
Mr. Friedlander.
I just wanted to ask what the concept was. Was there more involved in just what we were talking about? Because there is some ideas, something aside with the building or ice skating.
There was a whole concept dealing with rearranging Peterson Field, and it was still going through the process. Right? They wanted to move baseball fields, and they wanted to put in another field. They wanted to put in a hockey rink. They wanted to put this in. All right, it was all pie in the sky. All right, it was a concept. It was nothing more than a concept. It was a really good concept, but until they had the money to get it done by an architect, and I'm talking about this, and paid by an architect to put it in writing, it's a concept. And yes, it would have been nice for everybody to see a beautiful concept, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
Mr. Mayor, you had a comment? Mr. Mayor?
Yeah,
Well, while you're thinking, Mr. Friedlander Mr. Friedlander just remembered something he wanted to
I
say.
want to say one thing. That concept plan, is that the plan that I got accomplished?
I don't know which one you got.
Well, it was a plan, it was floating around with recreation.
Yeah,
And I asked
if it was through recreation.
Or recreation, so what you have to do is ask. And he got it.
Do you have it,
Okay.
Mr. Freelander?
I did like it.
It's only been a couple of weeks old.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, what would you ask? It should, I do believe it should have been presented when you're looking for, you need money to proceed.
This is.
You asked for it? You asked for, the plan? That's not the question, did you ask for it?
In a conversation, they said they had, one person had an idea, what
So
the
see,
concept.
there's none of
So you didn't ask for it, you received it, we didn't receive it.
Okay, so the mayor was thinking about what his comments were. Mr. Mayor, do you remember what you wanted to say?
Okay, you don't ask for it, but it's fact that we do.
Okay, please continue, Mr. Mayor.
I think that, not the breakdown, but I've been on 21 years, and normally the CRC, the way that the work
Mr. Mayor, just, would you mind explaining what the CRC is? for those who don't
CRC
know?
is a citizens rep committee appointed by a few on the council and appointed by myself. They're citizens from every program throughout the town that actually look at the health facilities, they look at with labor disputes, but coaches that have disciplinary stuff on coaches that soon goes up.
And it's just a committee that oversees recreation. It's a, you know, of council people and residents. So they do. They were in charge, not in charge, but they were in charge of them for 20 years, is to look at the facilities and make suggestions. So I think the suggestions that they're making over these years, they would just give them to the rec department. The rec department would put it in their budget, and the budget would come before the council, and the council would say, what do you need? This is what we need, and okay. Now, once you get that, you allocate the money to the need that the basketball courts, we use the basketball courts, of the year, they would allocate the money, and then it would come back and it would be the project. Now, going back to the $100,000 that we wanted to allocate, and then bringing up to $50,000 that Councilman Peterson was talking about, right? That money is from a different project, right? So what I was stating before is we allocate the $100,000, we only have to pay out $5,000, and if we only use $40,000 of it, that $60,000 sits out in bonding. But if we don't use it, we don't have to pay for it. We don't have to pay taxes on it. So by having that money out there, we have the ability to take that and then move it like these guys want to move the $50,000 to fix the courts. So whether we allocate $100,000 or you allocate exactly what we need, you don't know that ahead of time because the specs aren't out there. They're not up to date. You don't know what the costs are. So you allocate more money than you need, just like we all do. You know, going back to the $20 that you give your kid going to the movies, right? You want to know exactly what you're going to spend it on. No, I don't. Here's the $20. I know you're going to the movies. Bring me back change. I don't know if you get popcorn, milk duds. Well, not now. My kids are old now, you know. So, and that's how it's working here. And I think the disconnect is communication between each other. Now before how it was before is they got the specs during the bid specs after the money was allocated. Now this new council, like they were saying, they want the bid specs before. And I think that can be accomplished.
You can do that though.
Yeah, yes.
And Mr. Mayor, just so we, and I'm not interrupting you if you're done.
No,
just to follow up on it, if I could, Mr. Council President, was that we don't have a concept. There's some things that everybody wants to do some adjusting, and they're still in that process of going on there with the volunteer that did it. We don't have these specs that are going on, whatever the case may be. But moving forward, if we have all that information, then we could plan accordingly, set money aside for that. But knowing that none of those things were done, even if we allocated that $100 grand, nothing was going to get done immediately anyway.
No.
Okay.
But we wouldn't have had the questions about looking at the field doing an evaluation.
So, in other words, because one asks a question, there's still a bit of risk of somebody going there. Now, what we did was, though,
that's how it was. The risk, there's always a risk on everything that we do. Up until the times it's pointed out.
Right. But I mean, I make a stupid analogy. If you had a car with a torch showing through your front tire, and nobody told you about it, and when you drove and you had an accident because of that, but if the mechanic said, hey, I don't want you driving on this, you just eliminated a liability. You just eliminated a risk. You just eliminated somebody getting hurt. So are you faulting because it was
But no, then if he drove on that, got into an accident, then he can be sued.
I understand that.
Do that. Over negligence. Or is negligence. We know the difference between knowing about it, seeing it there, and not being told you had a liability, and the difference that after you were told is negligence. I worked negligent before because we never had a risk assessment, never had an insurance guy tell us that it was a liability. Once they did, then we're deemed to be negligent.
Okay, so it was a good thing then, by bringing that to light of the concern and risk that was there, potential injury or harm, life or limb, of the situation.
It was a good thing.
Because we could have got sued even if we didn't.
It was a good thing that we put the $100 grand in the budget to get it done.
Well, the report before this, because there was no report that indicated there was any issue, it was 2016.
No. But the thing needed to be upgraded.
Upgraded versus the liability risk that's pointed out now in the 30.
So just let me ask this to the council. So if we can come back and utilize some of this money, $50,000, right? And we have the rec committee present you their concept, right? And say that you guys like that, and it comes out to say $65,000, $75,000, or maybe less or maybe more, with the help of DPW, would you guys be, and ladies, be willing to possibly go back into the budget and do an amendment on just the practical portion of what we need over the $50,000 transfer that we need?
We said that in the budget. We wanted our DPW to do it, but the opponent
No,
didn't
just
say
order
it.
that. They came to the whole thing.
All right.
We didn't say that.
I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about the concept
I
that we
understand.
all see. You know?
Okay, so, Mr. Mayor,
We're coming to a compromise, let's get all work together.
yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, this council's not going to fund concepts and ideas. Plans are documents. Document it for us, present something to us, then we will consider. Okay, but we just had a member of the rec committee come up here and speak about what they called a plan that even you have acknowledged you have never seen. But yet these are Freelanders, guys. And yet, he never asked for it.
And we have one council member here who said that it's not ready yet to be acted on. The fact is, this council does not fund ideas or concepts. We fund plans, perhaps, if we agree with the plan. If there's an opportunity to see those plans. So work with the committee if you feel that that is appropriate, right? Put together plans, present the plan. But we have repairs that need to be made to get this reopened sooner rather than later. My suggestion is that you focus on getting the repairs done so that we're not disrupted as we are currently.
Are you
Okay?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Are you opposed or to just repairing it?
It's a catch. I'm opposed, I'm not opposed to repairing it, but I want to fix it.
All right.
I want to abandon it.
Then let's get it repaired so that it can be, the disruption is ended. Let's put together a plan, present it to the council so that we can, the disruption is ended, and then let's have a presentation on the concepts and put a plan is a plan. A plan is a document. It's not anything else is just an idea. I'm not going to write a blank check based on an idea. Period. That's as far as I'm willing to go. Mr. Brewer, did you have something you wanted to add?
The one thing I just want to point out is if we go from concept to actual design plan, with the design engineer, there needs to be some element of funding to pay for the engineer to do that work.
Fine.
So there would have to be some seed money, not necessarily the total amount of the allocation, but there would need to be some seed money to work off.
We have plenty.
It would be licensed
Excuse me.
but they're
Excuse me. We get plenty of memos on all kinds of things that are drafted, right? That is the starting point of the plan. Okay?
So would the council be willing to consider a plan that's not necessarily a stamp sealed engineered design?
Yeah.
An effort to fund this.
There needs to be a document that we can hold up, right? We can read, review, and hold up and say, these are the things that they say they're going to do. File it away, right? And then, all right, then, look, Mr. Mayor, you have a couple of options here. Let's end the disruption. You have funds that can be reallocated already without having to go out and borrow more money, right? This council's not giving blank checks and not funding ideas. We fund plans, perhaps, if we agree with the plan. This plan should be publicly presented so there can be input from the public as well. All right. We've spent a lot of time on this issue. I'm going to recess for 5 minutes so that we can continue with the agenda. We're rejoining at 9:05.
Oh my God.